Hola y bienvenidos a este video donde vamos a seguir explorando el pretérito. Hello and welcome to this video lesson where we're going to keep exploring the preterite tense. Specifically in this video, I'm going to be looking at some irregular preterite hacks. Some ways to help you work out the patterns in the preterite irregulars to learn all of them with minimal effort, with a lot less effort than trying to learn them one by one. If you are in possession of my preterite cheat sheet, you might have got to this video by clicking the link, in which case that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking you through my cheat sheet. Para empezar, vamos a mirar el verbo tener. So to start off with, we're going to be looking at our verb tener. This is really the main verb I'd recommend you learn in the preterite tense, because once you know this verb, we're going to use its endings for loads of other verbs. The first verb I'd like to mention is the verb estar, because basically, although estar and tener don't normally have anything to do with each other in all of the other tenses, in the preterite they're really similar. In fact, all you need to do is add es to the start of the tener conjugations and you get the conjugation for estar. Tuve, I had. Estuve, I was. Tuviste, you had. Estuviste, you were. And so on. So all you have to do is just add es and you've unlocked the verb estar in the preterite. We can also use the tener endings with andar. So for this you just need to learn then the irregular stem. So andar, instead of taking off the ar and then adding the endings, we then have to add something in. So it goes to anduv. So anduve, anduviste, anduvo, and so on. And you'll notice that these three verbs have something else in common. They've all got this uv in the irregular stem. And none of them have this v in the infinitive, but they all have a v in the irregular conjugations of the preterite tense. So that's another thing that makes them similar and hopefully will allow you to sort of categorize them in your mind as a kind of little family of irregulars. Next up, we've got the verb hacer. Again, this one's a bit weird, but it's not that strange because if you take off the er, then you just need to change the a to an I to get to the irregular stem, which is is or ith with the Spanish accent. So hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicistes, hicieron. Notice that in the third person singular, in the he, she, or the formal you form, the c changes to a z. That happens because if it were a c, we'd then pronounce it ico, because a c followed by an o makes the c a hard c sound. And here we want it to be a soft sound because it's hacer or hacer, so we want it to be hizo, hizo, and that's why we change it to a z there. Now we're going to look at some more verbs that use the tener endings. First up is saber. So for this we use our irregular stem sup, S-U-P, and then we add the tener irregular endings. Querer, which has the irregular stem quis, and then the tener endings. Poder, which has the irregular stem pud, pude, pudiste, pudo, etc. So again, we just use the tener endings with that. And then poner, which goes to pus, and then the tener endings. And notice that this is really similar. The puse is very similar to pude. All you need to do to get from poder to poner is swap the d for an s, and you're there. So again, a nice little hack to learn these two verbs together. And then we've got the verb venir, to come, which goes to vine, viniste, vino, vinimos, vinistes, vinieron. Again, if we take the IR off and we change that E for an I, the same as we change the A for an I in hacer, we get to our irregular stem. And then we just add the irregular endings which we've stolen from the verb tener. Moving on to my next preterite irregular cheat sheet, we're going to continue looking at 5 more verbs which use the tener endings, pretty much, you'll see in a moment. And first of all, I'm going to show you the verb conducir, to drive, producir, to produce, and traducir, to translate. Now, you might notice that these three, in the infinitive, they're quite similar because they've got this kind of prefix, this con, pro, or tra, and then the end of the verb is ducir. They all have this ducir in the infinitive. So they're kind of a little family of their own in the infinitive form. And then in the preterite, they also share a lot of similarities, so they all get this kind of uge, ugiste ending. And then in the final form of those, the 6th form, so the they, or the formal you plural form, we lose the I. So instead of it being condujeron, it goes to condujeron. And it does make it a little bit easier to say. Next up, we've got traer, which is to bring, and decir, which is to say. I've put them in the same sort of family because all of their stems in the preterite, they all gain a J. So none of them have the letter J in the infinitive, but they all have a J throughout the preterite tense. The next group, there's only 2 verbs in this group, and these are verbs which basically use the regular endings that we would use with ER and IR verbs, just without the accents. So ver, if this were a regular verb, we'd take off the ER, then we'd add our ER, IR endings, so we can add those, that's fine. The only thing we need to change then is we remove the accents. So instead of it being be with an accent, it's just be without an accent. Dar is a bit more weird because it's an AR verb, so if we take the AR off, we're left with D, so that's our stem, that's fine, that's the one we're going to use. But we don't add the AR endings, we add the ER, IR endings without the accent. So that's why it's good to think about this one alongside ver, because these are the two that use the exact same endings. And then finally, we've got these two verbs, ser, the verb to be, and ir, the verb to go. Normally these two verbs, they don't have anything to do with each other, the same as tener and estar. But for some reason in the preterite, they've got exactly the same conjugations. So once you learn one, you've learned both. So fui could mean I went. It could also mean I was. Fuiste could mean you went. It could also mean you were. And fue could mean he, she, it, or usted went, or it could mean it was. And that brings us to the very last preterite cheat sheet. Now the verbs I'm going to show you in a moment are verbs which behave just like the verb they contain. So they're basically verbs that contain another verb, which is one of the ones we've already looked at. If you know the verb tener, and we've looked at this one, so hopefully it makes a bit more sense to you now. If you know these conjugations, there are three other verbs that you also know the conjugations for in the preterite tense. Detener, retener, y contener. So these are the verbs to detain, to retain, and to contain. So notice that even in English, they all sound the same, detain, retain, contain. The prefix is the bit that I've highlighted in green. You just need to add that to the conjugations of tener, and you've got the conjugations for those other verbs. The police detained, la policía detuvo, I retained the information, retuve la información, they contained the virus, ellos contuvieron el virus. You've got three more verbs in your arsenal of verbs that you can use in the preterite tense. Our next ones use the conjugations from hacer. So we've got the verbs deshacer y rehacer. So hacer is to do or to make, deshacer is to undo, and rehacer is to redo, rehacer. So if I want to say yesterday I undid something, I could say ayer deshice algo. With rehacer, to redo, you can also say, to make again, to make something again. Él rehizo su vida, so he's remade his life, he made his life again. Next up, we've got the verb venir, to come. So once you know these conjugations, you can also use the verbs convenir, to be convenient, and prevenir, to prevent. In the present tense, we can say eso me conviene, that's convenient for me. In the past tense, we could say me convino, so it was convenient to me. Our next verb is the verb decir, to say. Once you've got these conjugations, you can then use the verbs predecir, to predict, and contradecir, to contradict. So notice how in English they're really similar again. Predict, predecir, contradecir, contradict. Ayer predije que llovería. Yesterday I predicted that it would rain. Tú me contradijiste. You contradicted me. And actually the word contra on its own is a preposition which means against. So if you think about contradecir as a verb and you break it down to contra and decir, it literally means against, to say. So it's almost like what you're saying is going against what someone else is saying. And then finally we've got our verb poner, which unlocks for us four other verbs. Componer, to compose, descomponer, to decompose, proponer, to propose, and disponer, which is to make available. So we do have the verb dispose in English, but that's sort of gone down a different route and has a different meaning, in the idea that you sort of throw something away if you dispose of it. Careful with that one because it's a bit of a false friend. All you need to do is add those prefixes, the com, descom, pro, and dis, to your conjugations for poner, and you can use those four verbs in the preterite tense. En el año 1810, Beethoven compuso una canción. So in the year 1810, Beethoven composed a song. Obviously, decompose is something completely different, and he only did that once he died. Proponer, to propose, so you can use that to talk about marriage as well. Hace 2 semanas, mi hermano propuso matrimonio a su novia. 2 weeks ago, my brother proposed marriage, you say in Spanish, to his girlfriend. And then disponer, to make available. Mis profesores dispusieron de su tiempo. So my teachers made their time available. These are not all of the verbs that you can use in this way. You will come across other examples as well. Another example that popped into my head is suponer, so the verb to suppose, and that works again with the conjugations you've learnt from poner. The good thing is, I didn't want to overload you with every last example in the Spanish language, but the good thing is now you understand how it works. You'll come across this quite often in Spanish, and you'll know that you're good to go, you're good to use the conjugations that you know, and just tag that prefix on the beginning. Some next steps I recommend you do to practice conjugating some irregulars. If you still don't feel 100% secure with your regular ones, I recommend you go over to my channel and watch my introductory video to the preterite, and I'd leave the irregulars until you feel more comfortable with those. But if you do feel absolutely fine with your regular preterites and you really want to up your game with the irregulars, practice writing different sentences with some of the verbs we've looked at in this video, with different people doing different actions in the past. Muchísimas gracias por ver y espero que te vaya muy bien con el español.